Hello, welcome to the Forge Your Trail podcast. I'm Frank Rodriguez, your host. Today we have as our guests Mr. Doug Perkins, who is a former OSBI criminalist. OSBI is the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. And we also have his wife and our boss, Barb Perkins. So I'm just going to give you both just 1 minute or two to sort of introduce yourself to our audience.
Ladies first.
Ladies first. Okay. Well, as Frank said, I am Barb Perkins. I work for the University of Oklahoma. I'm associated with the Forge Your Trail team and very excited to be here.
I'm Doug Perkins, former criminalist supervisor with the OSBI, meaning that I was a forensic scientist, a supervisor, but also being commissioned. I was at a lot of crime scenes, a lot of times in court, things like that. Retired after that 30 years, and then for the additional 13 years, so I was also a facility manager at the State Crime Lab in Edmond. And as such, I have retired now with 43 years of service. And I've been married to my lovely wife for 33 years.
Oh, wonderful. You know, I don't think I knew that, Barb. Congratulations. That's
thank you.
Amazing. Well, you know, we're not here today necessarily to talk about your OSBI background or your child welfare background. We're here to talk to you because you both made a choice to adopt a child. Kenneth is now...
He's 22.
22 years old. So 22 years ago, you made a decision to adopt a child. And Kenneth turns out to be a special needs child. And so what we'd like to hear about are the challenges and the good things about raising a child with special needs. So what inspired you to adopt? And before you adopted, how did you know that Kenneth was the one?
Oh, I'll defer to you.
Well, we both wanted children, and God blessed us with Kenneth. And you have to remember, God only gives you what you can handle. And so when the opportunity came to us after many years of being childless, we were told that there was a woman who was pregnant, who was interested in looking at our portfolio. And upon meeting her, we had a very lengthy interview with her, and she got to interview us at great detail. And she decided that the child she was carrying was going to be our son.
She decided?
She decided.
Yes.
It was her choice.
Interesting.
And so, believe me, I almost cried like a baby because it was so heartwarming to know that we were going to have a son in about 3 months. And so the emotions just flood up because we'd had an empty spot in our heart for all these years to look for a son or daughter. And that was being granted, thanks be to the Lord.
Well, that's beautiful. Barb, how did you feel about that?
Oh, extremely excited, because we had, tried to be able to have a child for, years. And so Kenneth was born 11 years into our marriage. And so we had, quite a bit of time before to really prepare for, having a child. And so it was a 3-month pregnancy.
A lot of time getting the room finished and a lot of things ready for his arrival.
Were you both nervous?
Yes.
I mean, it's a new adventure.
Yeah.
It's a new beginning in the further travel through life's highways.
Can you maybe tell us about the moment that you first met Kenneth?
I was in the delivery room, and so I got to meet him within his first minute of life. And so that was, just, awe-inspiring. And being able to see him and know that, he was, our son. And, it was so special to be there.
When both of my children were born and I held them, there was just this instant bonding that happened. Did you experience that as well?
Oh, I can remember that Doug in the hospital room, he was holding Kenneth and he looked down and he said, I know this sounds so medieval, but I feel like I have to go out and go hunting right away to provide for him.
I love that you remember that story. Doug, what do you remember about that moment?
Oh, just this literally a bundle of joy. in the hospital blankets, and I picked him up and held him close to me, and thanking the Lord for this day, because it finally came to fruition, and that she and I would have a child to love dearly through our lives, and that's not going to change. It is a permanence. When you adopt a child, it's a permanent relationship.
Absolutely. Right.
And we were so willing that the biological parents were willing to allow us to take him home.
Absolutely. So I remember when my first was born, I thought I was ready. I thought I was prepared. But when we brought him home that first night, I realized, oh my God, this is for the rest of our lives, and this is really scary. Did you go through a moment like that?
Yes, our situation when we first got Kenneth was that it was a very unique relationship in the fact that he had to stay in the hospital for 3 days with Barbara in her room, and the biological mother was having medical condition issues and was in her room a floor beneath. And as long as the biological mother's in the hospital, the child cannot leave.
I didn't know that.
Because it's a mother-child relationship. And this was the first time that this had happened through the OU Children's Hospital, of an adoption of this type. So that there was actually 2 mothers and 1 child in the facility. And so she was provided, and Kenneth was provided food and all the goes along with that. And as such, they had to confuse the computer into thinking that there was a mother who just bore a child who's extremely hungry and needs double meals. And it was just strange because they had to be a tag put on the child, an ankle monitor, so that to protect him from strangers and things like that. And so when he would be given the opportunity to be visiting his biological mother, they had to escort him through the hospital so that they wouldn't set off alarms. It was just a very different, that I had no way of being prepared for.
Right.
But the fact that I knew that when the biological mother was beyond her issue and was ready to go home, then Barbara and I could head home with our son. And it was a unique experience for everybody involved, the medical personnel, the biological parents, and the adoptive parents.
Barb, do you have any memories of that first night at home with Kenneth?
Well, I guess one of the big challenges for me was the sleep deprivation.
Right.
And because even though you hear about it, you don't really think about how much it's going to impact you until you go through it. And so, being able to withstand, having very little sleep and only getting sleep in snatches, that was, probably the hardest thing for me initially.
But you get used to that, and that makes you tougher as a parent, doesn't it?
Yes. Now, he did not sleep through the night until he was 9.
9 years old?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
It wasn't until he was 10 that he started sleeping in his own bed at night.
Wow.
Instead of crawling in with us.
Yes. And so, we went through sleep deprivation for a very long time.
What about the first bath? The first time we gave my son a bath, we were so nervous that I actually had to call my mother in to show us how to do it, and she did. But little things like that are unanticipated that, that you don't know that you're going to need some help with. Anything like that?
Well, one thing that was helpful for us is that, we had, interactions with nephews and nieces.
Oh,
and
yes.
so we
you
did have, some confidence going in. And so I think that was probably not as overwhelming to us as it could have been. And we were also a little bit older than a lot of parents. And
Right.
so I think that was helpful to us that we were not as nervous as, if Kenneth had been born when we were in our, 20s and early 30s, then I think that would have been more overwhelming than, the age that we were when he was, born.
Right. Okay. What were some of the biggest surprises, either good or bad or challenging about parenting a child with special needs?
Well, with Kenneth, our son, it's that we knew there would be some medical issues going from the start, based upon what limited histories we received about the biological parents. And as such, we were prepared for some of those. But as for the background knowledge we had of those issues, there was a huge learning curve because an autistic child can't be actually diagnosed autistic until they're 5 or 6 years old. So we always had a thought there could be something there, but he wasn't fully diagnosed till he was in his early teens.
I didn't realize that.
Certain things have to be exhibited, and him having developmental delays also delays a lot of these onsets that they're looking for at the key times. They were being delayed. So our journey in this is we've learned that if the person has a PhD behind their name and they're doing the assessments, they cannot provide you with medical diagnoses. They're not doctors.
Oh, yeah.
They're not medical doctors.
Has to be an MD.
It has to be an MD. So when Kenneth was in his late teens, mid-teens,
I'm not sure which one that you're going for, but he had an assessment done, and it really was a little bit misleading because the assessment was done by someone who was more of a counselor, and they said, okay, he has ADHD, and you're good to go. And I was going, I don't think that's everything that's going on. And they said, well, we don't see any, evidence of autism. And I was going, that it just didn't seem correct to us of what we had observed. And so we started to look for other resources to be able to do a true diagnosis, and found out that the instruments that had been used to assess him earlier were not sufficient to be able to describe everything that he was going through. And so we learned a very hard lesson, because we ended up delaying any sort of treatment that he could have received by several years by, not having a proper assessment. And
Right.
there were things that some providers would say to us that because we didn't know enough, we didn't recognize that they were telling us to go in a different direction than what we were. We also received some pretty poor advice of, the issues that he has now, and this was elementary school, we expect that he's going to grow out of it. Well, that was, by a layperson that wasn't really familiar with the actual issues that he was going through. And so one piece of advice that I guess I would give to parents is make sure that you really research the things that you're observing in your child, and multiple possibilities of what the source could be. And then to call upon people who actually have experience in that field to do any assessment that you're going through. People, and I don't want to criticize the school system, because he did receive a great education. But there were times when we listened to individuals that gave us advice that didn't necessarily apply to Kenneth and his circumstances. And so once we got to the point where that we were looking at, okay, what is he actually going through? What does that match? And then looking for the people for the team that could help address that, that's when we started to make some headway.
I see.
and team being the most important word there, having a good team that you can depend on.
I see. Yeah. Barb, so we've had this conversation a little bit in the past. Part of your learning journey as a parent was learning how to advocate for your child, right?
Yes. Yeah. He definitely had communication challenges, and so he could not express some of the things that he was going through. he would, make sounds and he could say words, but being able to express that in a logical way was, a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Well, Doug, so this one is for you with your criminalist background. How did your background in criminal investigation shape your approach to parenting?
Well, there's a theory out there about trace evidence, and it says every contact leaves a trace. So something would get broken in the house, and as usual, because it's just the way things are with a special needs child. And he would explain that, he would blame it on the dog or things like that. And I'm going, that's not what the evidence says. And I would explain very carefully how things progress from step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I look at him and say, is that true? And he'd go, yes, it is. And then he would say, I'm sorry, I broke it. And then he would walk off. And that's continued on through our relationship for 22 years, because when something bad happens, and things are going to happen, that's just part of life. I just at least want him to own up to it. And so there's times now that he'll walk in and he'll just say, okay, he'll hand me a Kindle and saying, I broke it, and then he just walks off, and it's just life. And I'll say, thank you for telling me the truth, and he says, my pleasure, and then he walks. We've learned to do the Chick-fil-A thing. Everything is my pleasure.
Yeah, having control over reactions is very important for him.
His reactions or your reactions?
My reactions,
I see.
and so when he tells me something. Really try not to raise my voice, because then that's going to add to the energy of the situation and really explode into something that's negative, as opposed to being able to, work through whatever has happened and, okay, where do we go from here?
Was that something you had to learn the hard way?
Yes.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
If you try to raise your voice to get his attention, that actually is the opposite of what you want to be doing. So I've learned, when I want to get his attention, I start to whisper, and then he has to stop. He has to break his concentration on what he's doing, and then look at me and then think about what I'm saying. And then sometimes I'll just motion him to come up to me. He'll walk over, what is it? And I said, we'll have a talk about whatever we're talking about. And then he goes off and does what he wants to do. But I have his attention at that moment. Otherwise, if I ask him something from across the room, I'll hear a yeah, and I know he didn't hear anything that I was saying. And that was true this morning about getting dressed. Are you dressed? Yep. Where's your shoes? Oh yeah, I forgot. And then I walk over and say, what about your shoes? I have to directly make sure I get eye contact with him. Then I know we can actually carry on a conversation. Other than that, he's in his own little world.
That sounds like how I have to treat my grandchildren sometime. I like the idea of whispering. I think that's a great tip, rather than raising your voice to get their attention. So what would you say, what's one myth about maybe adopting a special needs child that you would love to just bust wide open or to debunk?
Well, people have children to carry on their legacy, and they expect their children to walk like them, to talk like them, to be like them. A special needs child is not any of that. They have their own special world, their own special needs, their own special talents. Our son, in some areas, is a genius, and you have to respect that. And he is very smart in areas where I am not. And so you have to learn to, as I say, maintain a rigid flexibility.
That's interesting. Go a little bit further into that one.
You have your own preconceived notions of how you've been brought up and how you're going to go through life. That does not apply to your child. They have their own walk of life, and you cannot superimpose what you want on them, because they do not think like you, they do not react like you. They are a special gift, and you have to recognize that if I remain rigid in my own outlook in life, then it's just going to make more and more friction with our child. So I've learned I am rigid in certain areas, but I have to be very flexible in others. Like our morals, our moral compass, we can't negotiate on that. But how we obtain those goals, I have to learn different ways of getting there, so that at the end, because our son is an Eagle Scout, he serves at our church in a very important role. He's a ventriloquist. He is a musician. There are several things that he excels at, and I'm very proud of him. God knows I can't pick up a trombone and play a song like he can.
Yeah.
Never could, never will. So I'm flexible in the way I'm thinking about how he approaches an issue or a situation. And usually my solution is not what he would come up with.
Yes, his logic is not our logic. And but I would anticipate that a lot of parents, experience that whatever solution that their child has come up with is like, how did you think of that?
Yeah, because if you look at if you have multiple children, you look at one, why can't you be like your sister?
Right.
Because they're different children.
Absolutely.
They can't be like your sister.
Absolutely.
And you need to get that as a parent out of your head, because you're being too rigid. And actually, that hurts the other child greatly because you don't recognize their talents. You're trying to superimpose the talents of one child on the other. Not going to work.
So when my son was born, he was very quiet. When my daughter was born, she came out screaming. She's redheaded, like my mother. But from the moment I held them and saw them, their personality was there, it seemed like, and it's been a fixed sort of commodity of their lives. Was that true with Kenneth as well? Has his personality been there?
Yes. When he was 5 months old, he had his first word.
5 months?
Yep.
Yes. It was Thanksgiving. He had some sort of rash on his head, and he keeps scratching. And so we would take his hands and say, no, no. And there's one time when he wanted to scratch. He was on Doug's lap, and Doug's going, no, no. And then Kenneth just screams out, no.
So it wasn't Dada or Mama, it was no. And that was 5.5 months. So
That is amazing. That's the genius that you were talking about. So coming out.
Yeah. However, language has been a challenge for him. He did not have his first sentence for a very long time.
Right.
And that's why he still carries professional puppets today, because he may be feeling intimidated around adults still at this age. And so the puppet could do the talking for him.
That's fascinating. So the puppet is sort of like a mediator between him and the stressful situation.
It is a go-between. It allows things to be diffused, because being, for example, at the doctor's office, they expect him to have a puppet with him. And the doctor will turn to the puppet, are you feeling good today? And the puppet go, yeah. And, it just carries out. The doctors understand why there's a puppet in the room.
That's
because
fascinating.
It's his negotiator. So that if something embarrassing happens, it's just not reflected on him.
That's amazing. So when did he first gain an interest in ventriloquism?
Very young.
Yes.
Because he would play with sock puppets, and he would carry on, for example, like there'd be a song in the background and the puppet is singing to the song. His fine motor control is not there. But the gross motor controls are great, because the puppet, when he's moving the mouth, syncing it to some other song or a movie, it is directly in sync. And it's fun to watch him interact with that puppet. For example, we'll be going down the road in our car. He's sitting in the passenger front seat, and he's looking out the windshield. I'm looking out the windshield. The puppet is creeping up over the windowsill, looking at the driver in the next car. And the driver, I'll watch out of the corner of my eye, and the driver will be looking, and the puppet's waving, and it's looking. And if it's a clown puppet, they get really creeped out.
I've seen the clown puppet.
Now he carries Jeff Dunham's Peanut, the Woozle.
Hilarious. That's
and
funny.
Peanut is widely accepted because he's not threatening, not like a clown.
So, Doug, in our curriculum for On My Shoulders, we have a quote that I'm going to paraphrase it, but basically it says, men who are concerned that they're not going to be adequate enough to be fathers don't understand that becoming a father is what perfects a person, what changes a man. How has fatherhood changed you, emotionally, spiritually, or even professionally?
Well, getting married is a huge step for an old crusty bachelor like I was. And then having a child taught me to live outside myself. I had to stop thinking of I and me. It quickly converted, and as it's supposed to, it converts to we and us.
Mm-hmm.
And now that we and us is further expanded with the child.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about me. It's about taking care of us.
That's beautiful.
And so the sheepdog in me, being in law enforcement, I am there to protect my family and to provide where I need to. It's a team effort. If there's no team here, then it's going to be doomed to failure, no matter what adventure you embark on.
Mm-hmm. Barb, same question. How do you think becoming a parent has changed you spiritually, emotionally, maturationally, professionally?
I believe my perspective is very different.
Mm-hmm.
And similar to what Doug has said, that I used to think of what can I achieve first, and I focused on myself frequently before Doug and I were married. I believe that in caring for another person and thinking about their needs and desires, it really changes you as a person because you're expanding your universe. My approach used to be very direct, and it's like this action has this consequence and here's what we're going to do, and I would use my voice as a way to keep control in any type of situation. Well, that was not successful. And so I had to consider, other ways to be able to work through, challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it has made an impact on, more than just family life, but, in my professional life and, in everything that I do.
In law enforcement, the first level of force is voice.
Right.
And with law enforcement, you have command authority in your voice. I tried that on my son a couple times, found out real quick that just backfires.
Right.
So I had to rethink my training and all that to deal with a child with special needs.
Mm-hmm.
And it does make you grow way beyond yourself.
Right.
It's not like you're taking the pie and cutting it into another slice, and that other slice, this is for my son, this is what I'm going to get for my wife. No, you just get a much bigger pie.
Right.
Quit cutting it up into smaller pieces. That doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So you learn how to grow. And with being married and having a child, I know that I have definitely outgrown myself in the fact that I figured out I don't have boundaries. I can keep growing and keep growing into those. They just keep moving further and further out.
Right. You just keep expanding more and more.
Life's not the destination, it's the journey.
Absolutely. Well said.
I do think that how we approach Kenneth has changed because both of us grew up with, our parents were more along the lines of, you will receive a punishment
Right.
for whenever you've done something that we don't approve of. And with Kenneth, we want to engender a team atmosphere. And so he conforms to what we want to do because we make it fun for him. He wants to be involved. And so he will observe, here's what we want to have happen, and he'll comply with that because he wants to do that, not because he's being, directed or forced into it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad we're talking about this, Doug. I know that you were raised in a military family.
Yes.
And I believe your father was he a drill sergeant or was he a...
He started off as an E1 private, and he rose to the ranks of Chief Warrant 3.
Which is fairly high.
Very high.
Right.
It's equivalent to a major.
So tell us how, both of you, tell us how your upbringing has been challenged by being a parent to Kenneth, and how I know that both of you had things in your background, your own parentage that you didn't find necessarily positive. So how does raising Kenneth challenge that part of yourself that was raised in a specific way, and that, most of us try to parent the way we were raised?
Well, with my upbringing being with a dad who finally rose to the ranks of an officer, we were extremely regimented.
Mm-hmm.
The military, if you arrived to an appointment 10 minutes early, you just got there late. And with Kenneth, clocks don't matter. So I had to learn how to work around that. For one thing, and it started early in life, Kenneth, we're going to be leaving the house in 20 minutes. Kenneth, we're going to be leaving the house in 15 minutes. Till finally it's time to leave. It's given him 20 minutes to do what he deems important to get done.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the military, it's you drop everything and you move.
Right.
And that does not work with a special needs child.
Right.
You never surprise them with anything unless it's something they've already been thinking about.
Mm-hmm. Like
Last night going to a ball game. He was we just tell him, we've got a surprise for you. And he'll say, don't tell me all about it. I don't want to guess right now. And that went for about 24 hours till he realized what shirt mom was wearing and the ball cap, that we're going to go to a local baseball game. And he was so excited because he gets to go to a baseball game. He loves baseball. Mm-hmm. So we've learned, just treat him with surprises
mm-hmm.
instead of just giving him a schedule. He'll try to guess, and he gets great satisfaction out of guessing what we're going to be doing. Last night he totally guessed wrong, and when he saw mom, the way she was dressed, his face lit up, and he does an expression we call the monkey face, where his mouth opens real big, his eyes get real big, and it's like that's supreme satisfaction when we see him give us the monkey face, because we've hit on something that he so has been thinking about, but sometimes won't voice it about it with us. So it's fun.
Okay, Doug, what's the most dad thing you've ever said or done that made you think, yeah, I'm officially a dad now?
Boy, that's a tough one, because Kenneth, what makes me feel like I'm a dad the most is like when he's going to school. I love taking him to school, and I would be there until some other person in authority could take control of him,
right?
Because that was the way we had his IEP written up, and having a strong IEP helps him through life. Mm-hmm. And I remember sitting here thinking about, I'm going to be late for work. I'm going to be late for work because the TA had gotten sick and they were looking for a substitute. I'm with my son. Being late for work's not a big deal. I'm a dad.
I love that.
That's my job.
Mm-hmm.
And so I realized real quick, yeah, I need to worry about my job, but I need to know that I have a job where they don't worry about me that much being a few minutes late. I was about a half hour late, but that's no big deal. I'm a dad, and they all know that, and you take care of your children.
So what's one lesson that your child has taught you that no training at OSBI or anywhere else could have ever prepared you?
Patience.
There you go.
The child has taught me patience. He, for the longest time, had no concept of linear time. It would be things like, Dad, you remember a long time ago when I fell and bumped my lip? I said, last night? And he goes, yeah, long time ago. Mm. That's when we realized he has no idea of progression of time.
Wow.
We could talk about tomorrow, we could talk about the present, we could talk about the past. To him, it's all blurred. They all happen simultaneously. So it wasn't until he was in his early teens that he started to realize what linear time was. So that is an eye-opener for me, because we assume we all have the same talents. We do not. But the fact that he could live in the past, the present, and the future at the simultaneous instant, that amazed me.
Wow, that's such a concept.
Yeah, it's totally foreign to us, and I quit using the word normal people. We're average. He's special, we're average. And so when I talk about average kids, what they do, because I have learned there is no exact definition of normal. We all fit in different niches at different times.
Right.
And having the concept of living in all three time frames is amazing.
So, Barb, Doug just talked about having to miss work and coming to the realization that being with the child is the most important thing. How do you balance the intensity of your career with sort of the emotional demands of parenting?
Taking joy in the moment. And I think that's one of the most important lessons that Kenneth has had for me, is that there are times when he will be so excited at and it's something that a lot of people would be thinking of as kind of a mundane activity, but he'll approach it in such a way that he brings joy to it. So seeing that joy and experiencing that joy with him and being able to see it through his eyes. It's like, Doug talked about that. We went to a baseball game last night. And so in between the innings, there's, songs that are played, and he's up there, he's dancing around and he's singing, and you can just see all the joy that he's going through, and going, yes, this is fun.
That's great. So, Doug, were there moments when your investigative instincts kicked in at home, like when you were tracking down missing socks or decoding toddler tantrums?
Well, Kenneth gets very frustrated because, having a very deep law enforcement background, I know when someone's being furtive, meaning evasive, the way they look. There's a certain way people will look up they'll look up when they're giving you an answer, because they're actually looking into their mind, trying to pull an answer out of their head.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's I'm not going to explain them, but there's ways of interrogating techniques that this person's not being truthful to you, and so that would bug the heck out of him. Or he would have something that he's not supposed to be touching or holding, and he's not thinking about it at the time. He's just holding it, and I can quickly snatch it out of his hands and move off with it and then go put it away. And he's wanting to know how I did that so quickly, because he wanted to know one time what type of fighting techniques are the most effective ones. Now, he didn't say it eloquently. He just wanted to know. I said, you mean like taking a class so you can beat another kid up? And he goes, yes. The way you ask the question, you get an answer. And so I said, you're not going to be taking that class, because you're only thinking about beating somebody up. He was bullied and taunted as a child. It's sad to say that average kids will see a special needs kid and they want to be able to exert their dominance over them, not knowing that our son was born without the ability of fight or flight. He only has fight. He will not back away from an occasion. Wow. He has taken on bullies much bigger than him and successfully stopped them from being bullies.
Wow.
But it does get him on the records.
There was one time when Doug was giving an example to Kenneth, and he says, okay, you're on the beach, and your dog is with you, and Godzilla comes out from the water, and he's coming up, and he's going to stomp on your dog. And Kenneth says, well, I'll kick Godzilla. And Doug's like, well, this is Godzilla. I mean, he's bigger than you. How are you going to withstand Godzilla? He said, well, it's my dog. And I'm just going to kick harder. It didn't occur to him to make any other type of choice.
So what's it like raising a child that is being subjected to bullying? How do you handle that as a parent?
Well, as a parent, we have to recognize the fact that does happen, and also recognize the fact that your child is not always the victim.
Interesting.
That you have to get the correct line of questioning to bring out all the details of what's happened and why there was some type of conflict going on. And sometimes your child is not the innocent party. And so
I've learned that myself.
It's really hard to be judge, jury. in those situations because it's your child. But when you find out there's something that your child did that made this other person unhappy, and then they started bullying them, and you're telling your child, you should not have done this. Well, I was just doing it. I know, but the other child doesn't understand your actions. So you have to stop that. Just don't do that anymore. So by going in, especially when you're in a school setting and you're in the office and your son's sitting in the chair and they're explaining about the issues that went on, I would turn to Kenneth saying, is what they're saying true? Yeah. Could it have also been, and I'll give him another scenario, and he'll go, well, that could have happened. Okay, well, and then after a while, the authority is going, okay, he doesn't really understand. And then the child will be treated differently because they have a different understanding of life and all its intricacies. And it's not black and white. There's a whole lot of gray out there. And so raising an autistic child is a very challenging issue. However, the rewards totally outweigh anything that's presented to you. And you'll always love your child no matter what.
I'd like to ask you now about sort of the support that you got. What kind of support systems were most helpful to you during your parenting journeys?
I would say early on it was very challenging because we weren't sure of what resources that were out there. There are definitely we benefited from being in the school system that we're in because they did want to work with us. We did also, search out for supports. One thing that surprised me is that I had always assumed that our families would be extremely supportive, and that wasn't necessarily the case. So there would be times when we would be told, okay, for this activity, your child is not welcome to be here because we're not sure of, what his behavior is going to be.
Oh,
And so that was, hard to go through.
yeah.
We face in a reduced amount of that now. I think that, recognizing what support systems that you have and what limitations that are there is something that's very important because you have to have a realistic picture about what you can do and what you can't do. We've had to do a lot of planning. And so on a day that, a lot of parents, they're thinking about, okay, I need to rush through. I just need to push through to, be able to get at this location at this time. With our son, the more that we rushed, the more that would drive him to, okay, there's something wrong. I don't know what to do. And then he would be overwhelmed and then could have a meltdown. And so we learned not to do that. Being able to talk with other families that have similar challenges can be helpful because you can share information about, hey, I came across this resource and here's how I handled this situation. I mean, there are so many resources that are out there now compared to 22 years ago that I do wish that we would have had access to some of those resources back then. One of the things I think is very helpful to us is that we've made a point to surround Kenneth with people who care for him and that they are role models for him and that they care about what sort of experience that he's having. So, for example, we recently got to talk with a family that from our church that Kenneth used to be around quite a bit. And, now that he's graduated high school and, their kids have graduated, we don't see them as often as we used to. the daughter talked about that Kenneth was her spirit animal and that she loved everything that he did because he would approach things with, such a spirit of joy. And she's going, I want to be that. And so being able to think about him in a different way, so that we're not focusing in on his challenges or limitations, but on, what is it, the joy that he brings to other people. So I do think that looking for the joy, looking for the positives, being grateful for the things that we have, being able to tap into other families on, what are some of the experiences that they've had, and, what can we take from that, and looking for the people that can be part of the team to, help support your child.
Would you say that you've become sort of an advocate for special needs families?
To some extent, yes. We're not out demonstrating, but I do think that interacting with other families and
sharing your knowledge and your experiences.
Yes.
And other families do come up to us. They'll have a child who's 16. How do we protect them? And we talk about guardianships. And certain firms out there that provide those services, because it's a special thing, having special needs trusts put in place instead of just a regular family trust. Things that we've learned over time and have engaged the services of outside professionals. Also learning that there are certain entities out there that can provide the most correct type of assessments of your child. And we're willing and always able to provide that information, and word of mouth gets around. They're going, well, we heard you've already been through this. How do we do it? Don't reinvent the wheel. Find out what it is, and we're always willing to help because we know where they are now is where we've been.
Planning, because we've had to think about, when we're no longer around,
right?
How is Kenneth going to survive? And so we've put plans in place so that there are generational individuals who can take responsibility in certain areas.
Legal, medical.
Well, we spend a lot of time talking about the challenges of parenting a special needs child, but both of you have repeatedly talked about the joy that Kenneth brings to you and to others. So tell us a little bit more about joyful Kenneth, and what are the things that you really enjoy about being a parent?
Well, I have a rather quirky sense of humor. Growing up with my limited lack of height, I would be picked on. I would be bullied. And I found out real quick in life, if you distract them with laughter, making them laugh, and they forget about what they were originally there for. Distract and run. I was very fast as a kid because I learned how to run away from the big kids. And that fact of making jokes about a lot of things has been passed on to Kenneth. He is the pun master. We have pun wars to see how long we can keep this up on a simple topic like a bee, buzz, wing, honey. There's a whole bunch of things you can do with that, puns. And we would have these pun wars. And then I always bring dad jokes to the table.
Yeah.
Because dad jokes, I actually read a psychological report saying, dads, it is your duty to provide your children with dad jokes. The worse, the better. Because it teaches your children you will not die from embarrassment. That strike out, do something. If it blows up in your face, you'll get over it, you'll move on. So dad jokes are extremely important. So by having Kenneth emulate me in that he's always making puns and always doing jokes, it keeps him much happier because you have to think good thoughts to come up with good jokes.
Interesting. Yeah. Barb?
He's definitely, expanded my world on, things that I've been exposed to, especially in the world of music. And so I had always thought that, I was well versed in a lot of different styles of music because music has been a part of my life for a long time. His appreciation of different artists and exposing me to those different artists, from his generation, that's, really been enjoyable. And the way that he approaches music, because I had more of a formal training in music where that I would play the notes on the page.
Mm-hmm.
He listens to the sounds, and so he plays by ear. He can read music, but he's very comfortable with. He'll have our Echo Dot, play a song, and then he may pick up his trombone and he'll start playing with it.
That's
And-
pretty amazing.
And so being able to appreciate those talents and to be able to see that. And when I realized that that was something that was pretty rare was when he was a sophomore in high school. His band was doing a fundraising event at a local restaurant, and there were different musicians who came in to play, and they were all playing from their, the music, the sheet music. And he stood up and he just started to play. And he would take requests and he'd go, okay, hum that for a little bit. And he would go, okay, I've got that one. And he'd just start playing. And it's like,
That's amazing.
wow, I hadn't thought of it that way, that was a pretty rare talent.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because he even walked outside, out on the sidewalk in the parking lot, and attracted people to come into the place because he was outside playing on his own. And they were getting a kick out of it. And he would come in at different intervals and hand money to the director, then go back out and go play some more. He was only scheduled a certain amount of time. No, he stayed for a very long time because he saw that as a great way to have joy.
Yeah.
And it brings joy in our heart knowing that he loves doing this.
And he's good at it.
Yes.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting. You were talking earlier about his perception of time. And I was thinking about his musicianship. And he's got great timing when it comes to musicianship. So I thought that was interesting that he was such a great musician and then had this time perception.
Yeah, because there was one time he told me, he said, I like school, but I don't like math. And I said, whoa, what do you mean you don't like math? Oh, there's all these things that you have to learn. I said, you already know them. You're a musician. He said, what? And I said, I showed him a sheet of, what is this? It's a quarter note. So it's 1/4. Yes. That's a fraction. I said, yes, music is math. Math is music. So you already know math. After that, it was all okay.
That's brilliant parenting. I have to say that. Well done. Well, we're coming to the end of our podcast. So I'd like to ask each of you, if you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice before becoming a parent, what do you think it would be?
One piece of advice. I think that focusing in on the moment can be very important instead of thinking always of the future and worrying about the future.
It's very true. You have to live in the present and enjoy what's going on about you now because we don't know what the future is going to be.
Right.
So what he could become is not as important right now as to what he is.
That's beautiful.
And so we have to understand he has his own journey through life, and we get to be with him for a limited amount of time. And so if you don't revel in that time that you have from his birth till we pass, then if we're fretting and fuming about everything else, we're ignoring him. And your child needs your attention. Not to the point that you're a helicopter parent or anything like that, because they need to learn how to stumble and pick themselves up.
Right.
So patience is also very important, but living in the moment is extremely important.
Can you tell us why you chose to adopt?
Well, Barb and I in our hearts knew that we wanted children, and God was directing us down this path. And the adoption was the most logical, because we knew that by accepting a child that couldn't be raised by someone else, that we could bring that child into our home and provide that child with better opportunities, a whole lot of love, and knowing that we sought this child with every fiber of our being, that adoption was the best thing for us. And I always tell couples that want a child, look into adoption, because that child is yours every which way. I may not be the biological father, but I get to be the daddy. And that's very important.
Right. Thank you for joining us today on the Forge Your Trail podcast. Our guest has been Doug Perkins, who is a former OSBI criminalist, and Barb Perkins, who is our boss at the Forge Your Trail program. We'd like to thank you both for being our guest and for answering all of our questions. And thank you for adopting Kenneth and giving Kenneth and the rest of us so much joy in life.
Thank you.
Thank you.